Hey YouTuber, Steve here, also known as TrainLine14, and today I'm going to be giving you some quick tips and tricks on servicing your Lionel train layout. This video is meant to be most efficient as possible, so without further ado, I posted some annotations on the front of your screen right now. If you'd like to skip to a particular section of the video for some quick help, you can do so. If not, you can just watch the video all the way through. We're covering how to clean your track, service your diesel engines, and your steam engines. We're going to go from least difficult to most difficult, which is obviously the steam is the most difficult. If you're watching the video all the way through, bear in mind that because of these contents I may be repeating myself a little bit, so if you realize that, I guess you're just going to have to deal with it. I guess it'll also reiterate some concepts for you. But anyway, before we begin you're going to need a Lionel lubrication and maintenance kit. There really is no other way to do the service unless you have a kit or a similar kit, maybe one made by MTH or the like. But anyway, without further ado, let's get right into the track. So first things first, let's start with the track. This is probably the easiest form of maintenance you can provide to your layout, and it makes a huge difference. If you ever notice your trains lagging on switches or losing connection on points really far away from your transformer or even close to your transformer, it's most likely because you have dirty track. Now, to clean your track, you're going to have to use a few components here. What I like to do, and this is the most efficient way that I've figured out to clean track, you're going to need your track cleaning eraser, or your eraser, because it's used for multiple purposes, and your track clean, obviously. Now, how I do this is I start with the eraser. And what you can do with this, some of the residue from your trains, it's like a black, like carbon on the rails. The first thing I do is I grab my eraser and I try to scrub off as much of that carbon as possible with just the eraser. Most of it will indeed come off with this too. You can actually see it, especially if you look on the center rail. That's where most of it exists, because that's where your power comes through, your AC power. And so if you just you got to press a little bit hard, but not too hard. And if you do that and kind of just go around whatever section's dirty or whatever you want to clean, that provides a great start, and it gets most of the residue off. Now, to finish it off, that's where your track clean comes into play. Grab a paper towel or two, depending on how dirty it is or how much track cleaning fluid you're going to be using. Fold it into a little square. Take your track clean, and you want to put and I'm not actually going to do it because I'm not actually cleaning the track, but I'm demonstrating. You want to put a decent sized circle of the track clean on the center of the paper towel, as wide as your tracks are. And simply enough, just wipe down the tracks, and you'll definitely see it come off onto the paper towel. There'll be 3 black lines, and that's getting all the remaining residue that you didn't get with the eraser. Before you run your trains, I recommend letting that dry for maybe a few minutes, just to be sure that none of the residue will get on your roller pickups or your wheels. But other than that, that's how to clean track. Clean and simple. Okay, now let's take a look at how to service diesel engines. I got my Katie on its side here, showing you the underside. First things first, always use a towel to set, or some other soft surface to set your engines on. With all the detailing on there, you don't want to damage any of it or break it off or anything like that. So I always use like an old towel is perfect for this kind of job. Now, what a lot of people are confused about, obviously the first thing you start with is you look at your manual and you see all the lubrication points. Simple enough. But sometimes these arrows aren't really accurate. It's kind of hard to tell. The main thing you got to get from your manual is what lubricant to use. A general rule of thumb is grease on gears or other moving parts and oil on axles, but that's not true for everything, so that's why it's very important that you check your manual to see exactly what they want you to use. But in general standards, grease on gears, oil on axles, and that's what it goes for this Katie. So the 2 things you're going to need out of your maintenance kit, obviously your oiler, and then also your multi-purpose lubricant, and this is considered your grease. Now, what a lot of people have trouble with is if you tried to do this before, shine a light in there, if you try to do this before, let's say you have your oiler, look how narrow that space is. That's ridiculously small to get this huge nozzle into there to oil the trains, and a lot of people get kind of, hesitant to do it because they're afraid they'll get oil on something they're not supposed to, or Well, here's a little easier way to do it. What I've learned to do is you want to grab two very inexpensive items. A small little solo cup, like this. These work great. These little small ones are perfect. This is what you're going to use to hold the oil. And a simple toothpick. Easy as that. So what you do, you can probably already figure it out, put a few drops of oil, a few drops, not a lot. All you need is a few drops, because if you always need more, you can always get more, but you can never put it back. So use sparingly. And what you can do is you can dip your toothpick in there, and it's perfect for getting into the little grooves. It works really great. It gets into all the little crevices that humongous nozzle on that bottle can't. And so that's a very efficient way to oil your trains. And for those of you who are hesitant, like I originally was, to oil your trains, don't worry. It's really not a big process. As soon as you do it, you get better at it, and it becomes a lot easier. Just be careful that you don't get oil on your roller pickups or on your wheels, like on the part that rides on the track, or the track itself. If you do, no big deal. Just get a paper towel, wipe it off. It's not the end of the world. A lot of people might be nervous, like, oh no, I got oil on something that isn't supposed to. It's alright. I've gotten oil on my wheel once before and I just wiped it off. It's totally fine. If you get it, when you're oiling the axle, if you get a little bit on the front of the wheel, that's okay. That's not touching the track or anything, so that's not going to disturb the electrical contact. But again, try to minimize the amount of oil spill. Like, that's why using this toothpick is great, because you get it right in there, get exactly where it needs to be. Very minimal amount, just enough to lubricate it. And that'll prevent the squeakiness from occurring in your wheels. Now the grease I usually don't have to use on steam engines unless the engine has gears in it. Some of the starter set steam engines need to use grease, but we'll talk about that in a few minutes. Most diesel engines have gears, so all you got to do is, and you don't need to use a toothpick or anything for this, you can just take your grease bottle and just dab a little bit in the sections where the gears meet up. Just a little bit, not a lot, just like the oil. And then if you want, you have to push kind of hard, but you can work it in there with your fingers. Just be very gentle, don't force it or anything, but usually you can just, yep. Yeah, you should be able to. It's got a little bit of resistance to it, but if you just gently apply a little bit of force, you can spin the wheels that are closest to the gearbox, like right here, so these two wheels, and that'll work that grease in there. And doing this kind of maintenance can extend the life of the locomotive. Very easy to do. Once you do it a few times, it gets a lot easier. So that's how to service the diesel engines. Let's take a look at steam now. Okay, now for servicing steam locomotives. This is definitely the most time-consuming and tedious process of maintaining your trains, but once you get good at it and you understand what you're doing, it becomes a lot easier. And because it's so tedious, this is the exact reason steam was taken out of service back in the 50s and 60s. The last of the steam engines is because it was just so expensive. You had to have all those extra maintenance workers on there, and it just took a lot more effort to keep them up and in good shape. But anyway, that's for a different video. That's just for you train history buffs out there like me that love steam. Steam is my absolute favorite. But anyway, first thing before you start, I recommend putting your engine on a soft towel or a similar surface, just so you don't scratch or damage any of the parts on there. You wouldn't want to damage any of that high detail. But before you start applying the actual lubricant, take a look at your manual, and you've probably already done so. The thing you want to definitely check is what type of lubricant to apply, whether it's grease or oil. My rule of thumb is grease on gears, oil on axles. Now that doesn't apply to everything. There are some exceptions that I can't name off the top of my head. But for the most part, you're going to be oiling axles and greasing gears. And that's what applies to this engine here. Now, a lot of people notice that, these arrows aren't necessarily drawn very accurately. Like, I got some of them pointing at like the bottom of the wheel, and you definitely don't want to oil that. And so that's what I'm here to clarify for you today. Lionel says you don't want to oil your roller pickups, the bottoms of your wheels, or your track. Now, if you do, it's not the end of the world. A lot of people get freaked out and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing, so I'm just not going to do it. No, don't do that. You definitely want to do this process. You just want to be a little careful and a little more knowledgeable so you know what you're doing and you don't make any mistakes. If you do get oil on your wheels or your track or your roller pickups, it's okay. I've done it. You just have to wipe it off with a paper towel. If it's a little bit, it's not a big deal. So there is room for a little bit of mistakes. Now, you don't want to be spilling a lot of oil on there, but if it's just a little bit, you'll be all right. Now, the main concern, too, with this is they want you to oil your axles, but look at how thick the tip of this oiler is. You ain't even going to come close to putting that in there. Here, I'll get my flashlight for you. It's ridiculously hard to get the oiler in the correct position to oil. So I thought of a little trick I learned. You want to get two really non-expensive items. One of these little Solo cups. These are great. These little small, like almost like plastic wine cups or whatever you want to call them. And a simple toothpick. It's perfect because you can already figure it out. We're going to put a few drops of oil in this cup and use the toothpick to apply it to the wheels. It makes it super easy. Now, when you put the oil in this cup, a few drops is all you need, and I literally mean a few drops. If you end up needing more, you can always take more, but you can never put back, so use it sparingly. But literally, a few drops will literally get most, if not all, the engine completed. So once you put a few drops in there, maybe just kind of let the cup sit on its side so they all gather down in a bottom corner. And you can use the toothpick to swipe in the cup and get into all those really tiny crevices that exist like behind these big drive rods. Now, when oiling your axles, you can oil the axles on the back of these wheels, definitely on all your driving wheels. You want to get it up, if you can see there, up underneath the frame. Large hand is hard to see past. Up underneath the frame, like into the axle. And it doesn't have to be perfect. Some of them are very, very tight, so just do the best you can. Try not to get, although it's not as much of a problem because this part doesn't make electrical contact, try not to get it on the front of your wheels either. If you do, just wipe it off, not a big deal. And then also, you can oil the front axles on these wheels too. And that'll just prevent some squeakiness from occurring and keep rust from coming on and just overall protect the engine. Now, the hard thing about steam engines is in addition to the wheels, you also have to oil the drive rods. So how you do that is you notice that it connects to each of the wheels. Just take a little bit of oil, and this toothpick is in a plastic wrapper. I'm not actually oiling right now, I'm just kind of showing you. Oil the screws, and just around the screw, try to get mainly what you want to get is underneath it. And again, you probably can't see because of my hand. What you mainly want to get is underneath the screw. There's a screw that inserts the drive rod into the wheel. Get underneath and all around the screw. Not really as much on top of it, mainly the parts that rub together. That's where you want to oil so it prevents the squeakiness. Do for each segment. Hard to reach. Sometimes you can spin the wheels to kind of get the drive rod in the correct position so it's easier. When it comes to here, this part right here with the eccentric crank, just get in between. If you can, lift up the drive rods gently and get in between them. Squeeze a little bit of oil in between, and then when you spin the wheels, it'll kind of work the oil in. So basically, any parts where rubbing occurs or friction happens is where you want to oil to prevent that squeakiness. Not up here, like where this is, not where the eccentric crank connects to the body, mainly just on this part here where the eccentric crank meets the washer and all that stuff. And that's basically how to oil the steam engine. Also, Lionel says if you are very careful, but this is very difficult to do, you can do it on the sides of the roller pickups, but really that is a very tight space. I would only do that if it was oil or if it was squeaking a lot and really bothering you. Otherwise, I feel like it would mainly be more of a spill than a preventative maintenance measure, but up to you if you want to do that. Now, some steam engines, like this GS6, require a little bit of grease. A lot of starter sets steam engines have some gears in them. Usually what you want to grease is gears. Like I said, grease on gears. Now, sometimes, as you see right now, there is no gears. Or so you think. Actually, and your user manual will tell you this engine does have gears. You just have to know where they're at. These little screws right here, these little black screws, if you see how this little part of the body kind of comes up and around, that's because there's a gear inside. and you just can't see it. Whenever you have gears, and these are probably the most confusing, gears that are built inside the body, all you have to do is take off these screws, and I usually set my engine upright with the bottom facing up, and just drop 1 or 2 drops of grease, not a lot, very sparingly. Put a little bit of grease in there, let it kind of sink its way down, maybe keep the engine upside down for a little bit so the grease will sink down onto the gear. And once it's in there, you can put the screw back on, and usually, I'm not going to do it because it's sitting on its side, but you can turn the drive wheels a little bit to work it in. But honestly, with the steam engine, you kind of just have to run it a little bit, especially if it's in there, and it'll work itself in on its own. But that's mainly the quirks of lubricating the steam engine. This also has the tender too. You just have to oil the axles on that if they ever start squeaking. But that's mainly the gist of it. And once you do this more and more often, it'll get easier and easier. So keep practicing, keep these tips in mind, and pretty soon you'll be a professional with this. So that just about does it for my maintenance tips and tricks video today. Hopefully some of these ideas helped you out, maybe made you a little less hesitant to now perform some maintenance on your engines you may not have known too much about before. If you like what you saw today, if you wouldn't mind leaving me a subscription, it really helps me out, gets my videos more publicity. I want to try to help out as many people as I can with the train community, people who are new to the hobby, and just make the hobby more fun and more efficient for everyone that enjoys it. So if you could do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, if you liked this video, be sure to check out some of my other tutorials. I do a bunch of tutorials on Legacy. That's probably my most popular video series right now, are my Legacy tutorials, so feel free to check out those. But in conclusion, yeah, thanks for watching. Hope this helped you out, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.